Sit across from a stranger in an English tavern sometime around the year 1340 and give me one honest look at what's in front of him. Just one. Because from that alone, from the food on his table and nothing else, I can tell you where he was born, what he believes, whether he's rich or poor, and roughly how close he's standing to death right now. And he won't have to say a single word. He couldn't tell you himself, even if he wanted to. He can't read, he can't write, and he'll leave no diary, no letter, no name carved into anything that lasts. Yet the strangest thing of all is this. 700 years after this man vanishes from the earth without a trace, it's this exact table, this ordinary meal, that will let us read him like an open page. So look closer. The rain hasn't let up outside, and the smoke in here is thick enough to sting your eyes and coat the back of your throat. Wet wool steams by the fire. Mud dries on a dozen boots by the door. And somewhere, a stranger coughs the deep, rattling cough of a hard winter. Then the tavern keeper drops something heavy in front of the man across from you. And here's your very first clue. The one that breaks everything you thought you knew. It isn't a plate. It's bread. A thick, dark slab of maslin, baked hard yesterday on purpose, so it won't collapse under hot stew. That bread is his plate, his bowl, and part of his meal all at once. And strangely, that humble slab may be worth more to him than whatever meat ends up on top of it. Hold that thought, because it's the key to reading this whole man. But before we decode the bread, look past him to the fire, to the pot that hasn't been emptied in days, holding meat that may have been dead for months. That pot is the next clue, and it's a strange one, because it barely resembles anything you'd call soup today. What the keeper ladles out is thick, dense, somewhere between stew and paste. Steam curling off it, while slow bubbles push up through layers of peas and onions and melted fat. This is pottage, and for a man like the one across from you, it isn't one meal among many. It's the meal, morning and night, season after season. And here's the part that tells us so much about him. That pot is almost never emptied. As the liquid cooks down, more water goes in. Each morning brings a fresh handful of turnips, a few dried peas, the green tops of leeks, thrown on top of yesterday's leftovers, which are still breaking down somewhere beneath the surface. It sounds careless, but it's the opposite of careless. Fuel cost real money, and starting a fire from cold took real labor. So keeping one pot alive was far smarter than cooking new every day. The pot didn't just hold his dinner. The pot lived. Now look at what's actually in it. Somewhere in that broth is the ghost of meat. Not a steak, not a portion, not even a chunk he could point to. Just a single salted bone, or a scrap of bacon simmered until its flavor bled into everything around it. This man doesn't eat meat. He eats vegetables that remember meat. And that thin, meat-haunted broth is your loudest clue yet about who he is. Watch his hands as he reaches for the bowl. They're thick, calloused, the knuckles swollen from work that never really stops. And a body doing that kind of labor in this cold burns somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 calories a day just to keep going. This watery pot is how he claws those calories back. Watch how he holds the spoon, too. Close, low, guarding it, eating fast the way only a man who has known real hunger ever eats. You don't need his life story anymore. His hands and his bowl already told you. He is a man who survives by burning himself down and refilling the tank one thin bowl at a time. But that faint bone hiding in his broth is about to betray something he never meant to reveal. Not just that he's poor, but what time of year it is. and how the seasons themselves decide whether a man like this eats at all. Here's how that bone gives away the season. In this world, nothing was killed in winter that could be killed in autumn. As the cold set in and the animal feed ran short, most livestock was slaughtered in late fall, and the instant it died, a race began. A race to lock that flesh away from time before it could rot. Salt was the weapon. Whole cuts of pork disappeared under coarse layers of it, packed into barrels until the meat was more mineral than muscle. Strips of beef hung over slow fires and smoked hard and dark. Fish were dried stiff in the coastal wind and stacked by the thousands into casks. So that salted bone in his broth is really a timestamp. Proof that somewhere, months ago, an animal died so that this exact bowl could exist tonight. And the salt left its mark. A cut like that was so aggressive, it often had to soak overnight just to be edible. Which is exactly why one small piece could season a whole pot. But now watch what happens if there's no meat on his table at all. If instead, there's a dull silver herring staring up from the bowl. That single swap tells you something the man would never announce out loud. It tells you what day it is. Because this is a Christian world, and the church didn't suggest going without meat. It commanded it on a schedule. Every Friday, the whole of Lent, and a long string of holy days scattered through the year, somewhere close to 130 or 150 days annually, nearly a third of his entire life. Meat was simply forbidden. And into that gap swam the herring, cheap and sturdy and hauled inland from the North Sea, in numbers almost impossible to picture. So if he's eating fish tonight, you can read it backward like a code. It's probably a Friday, or the middle of Lent, or the eve of some saint's feast. His plate isn't just dinner. It's a calendar, an edible one, marking out a life quietly programmed by faith down to the very bite. This man's whole year is written in whether a bone or a fish is floating in front of him. And yet, believe it or not, the loudest clue on this table hasn't even spoken yet. Because before this man lifts a finger, before he says one word, the bread in front of him is already shouting exactly which rung of the world he was born onto. And the bread reads like a fingerprint, because the rule of this world was brutally simple. The darker the loaf, the harder the life. A nobleman ate soft white wheat bread, pale and fine, milled from expensive flour, sifted again and again until every trace of roughness was gone. The man across from you eats maslin, a dense, dark loaf of rye and barley and oats and whatever lesser grain the land gave up that year. Heavy enough to feel damp in the middle, chewy enough to tire out his jaw. So you don't need to ask his rank. The color of that loaf already told you. But now the paradox from the very beginning finally makes sense. That strange idea that his plate might be worth more than his meat. Here's why. That slab of maslin isn't just holding his stew, it's soaking up the grease. And when the meal is done, he'll eat the plate itself. To a nobleman, bread under the food is a disposable tray, tossed aside or handed to the poor. To this man, that same soaked slab is calories he cannot afford to waste. It's the difference between going to bed fed or hungry. The plate is worth more than the meat, because for him, the plate is survival. And the bread is leaving a mark on him you can still find 7 centuries later. Look at his teeth, worn flat and gritty, because rough milling left tiny fragments of stone and bran in every loaf, slowly grinding his molars down with each meal. His own body is keeping a record of every bite he ever took. That same refusal to waste ran through everything here. The fat flavored the vegetables, the bones thickened the broth, the spent grain from brewing fed the pigs, the ash from the fire went out to the garden. Nothing was thrown away. It simply moved to its next life. And don't you dare imagine this food was bland. Herbs went in by the fistful. Sharp verjuice from sour crab apples cut the heavy fat. Mustard was ground fierce enough to fight that salted pork. And in richer homes, pepper and saffron were displayed like treasure. The real enemy here was never flavor. It was sameness. But there's one clue left on this table, sitting in the cup by his hand, and it will tell you the darkest thing of all. Whether the very world around this man is quietly trying to kill him. That cup holds ale, cloudy and warm and just a little sour. And it's the last clue on the table, and quietly the darkest. Because the fact that he's drinking it at all tells you the water around him cannot be trusted. Nobody in 1340 has ever heard of bacteria, but people have watched the pattern for generations, and the pattern is merciless. The wells near crowded towns make people sick. Standing water kills, and fermented drink somehow does not. So this whole world runs on ale, and everyone drinks it. Men, women, and children. Because the small ale in his cup is weak, often only around 2%, just enough to be safe without stealing the day. Without hops to preserve it, that ale spoiled fast. So brewing never really stopped. Across England, alewives brewed fresh batches every few days and hung a pole or a branch outside the door to signal the drink was ready. And the stuff was so thick and grainy, it was almost like drinking liquid bread. So read the cup honestly, and it tells you the environment itself was hostile. That survival here meant outsmarting the very water with yeast. But look up from his table now, at the room around him, because the tavern is a clue too, the biggest one of all. This isn't entertainment attached to society. In a world with no newspapers, no radio, and almost no one who can read, this smoky room is society. The traveller stamping in from the Canterbury Road carries something worth more than the coins in his purse. He knows which bridge washed out in the storm, which village is whispering about plague, where the tax collectors were last seen. That knowledge moves mouth to mouth across these benches, and a shared bowl of pottage becomes a kind of social currency, buying you a seat inside the network, softening for a few hours the class lines that rule the daylight. And when the night needs softening, there's comfort here too. Frumenti, wheat simmered slow in milk, sweetened with honey and dried figs, hauled in from trade routes farther than he could ever dream of walking. Now here's the part that should stop you cold. Every clue you just read off this man, the calloused hands, the teeth ground down by bran, the salt-smoked bone, the marks of hunger and season and faith, none of it disappears when he dies. It stays. It stays in his bones. Because this is exactly how archaeologists read these people today, 700 years later, measuring the chemical isotopes locked in ancient teeth and bone to rebuild an entire lifetime of eating, learning who lived on fish and who tasted meat, who starved in which bad harvest year. This man never wrote a word. He left no letter, no diary, no name. But his own skeleton kept the record for him, and his last meal is a page in a biography he never knew he was writing. In a world that filed no paperwork on the poor, food became the way the voiceless finally speak across time. Think about what that means. We don't know men like this through kings or chronicles or grand cathedrals. We know them through a scrap of bone, a worn tooth, the residue at the bottom of a pot. They died certain they were nobody, certain they'd vanish without a trace. And yet here we are, reading their whole lives off a single meal. But there is one last thing on this table that no isotope will ever recover. One clue the bones can't keep. Watch him. A stranger pushes through the door, soaked and shaking from the cold. And without a word, the man across from you slides his own bowl of pottage down the bench toward him. Nothing in his skeleton will ever record that. Because that was the one thing the food could never tell us. Not what he ate, not what he believed, but what he chose to be. 700 years separate that quiet act of kindness from you and me. And it's the only part of him that was never written down anywhere, but in the memory of the man he fed. If this journey stayed with you, subscribe and join us again, and we'll open the door on another world that history left behind.